Hello, and welcome to our worship service at First Unitarian Society of Ithaca. As spring springs all around us, we gather to nurture our connections, seek out inspiration with one another, and to work and pray for justice, especially for the ever-increasing number of lives that have been taken from us by acts of unfathomable state-sanctioned violence. My name is David Solomon, and I am the Celebration Associate today. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to everyone, whether you are a newcomer or a longtime attendee, members of the Ithaca community, or watching from elsewhere. We are so glad you have chosen to be with us. Please check your email, our Facebook page, and our website for information about how to create connections with us. If you'd like to receive weekly updates describing opportunities for engagement with our community, please email a request to office@uu.org. Newcomers are especially invited to visit our website and complete a newcomer form on the home page so that we can get to know you and you can learn more about us. Our worship theme this month is Becoming, and it will be reflected in our music, readings, and sermons, as well as in some of our programming. Our service this morning has been pre-recorded, but we look forward to sharing the service broadcast on Sunday morning and seeing you at the live coffee hour that follows on Zoom. And speaking of our service, our speaker today is Magdalene Lindeberg, Ithaca resident and Assistant Director of Cornell School of Integrative Plant Science. She has been attending FUSIT with her family, Keith, Ronan, and Julian, since 2001.
Good morning. I'm Sam Weeks, bringing you a reminder from the stewardship team. Not that I'm really doing it. My tech savviness ends with finding the on switch. I do not know how this presentation got from my home to you. If you're curious, ask Margaret Nichols. I may not have picked up much on computer functioning, but from observations, I've learned a little about using this mode of communication. Make sure your face is somewhere near the center of the screen and sit still. Some of you have had me on the verge of motion sickness. And align your face more or less with the screen. One does not want to view your nostrils, nor do we don't like to be talked down to. Speaking of things you should know, we are on our annual pledge drive, and some of you are still sitting on your pledge card. So dig it out from your pile, the mail, etc. It looks just like this. It's pink. So locate your card, familiarize yourself with its contents and directions. Choose how much and how you will pay. You might want to note we're in the 21st, 22nd pledge campaign year. You have many easy options. Fill out the card and mail it back to the church. Or pledge online, or via email, or phone. I feel like during this time of COVID, we've all been coiling up, an ever-tightening spring to leap forward when we regain our sanctuary and togetherness. I sense the release of all this pent-up energy will levitate our church building several feet off the ground. Let's make sure we're ready for this event by making an appropriate pledge today. We have our work ahead of us, but folks have never been so primed to move forward with love.
Our opening words this morning are from the poem Threshold by Maggie Smith. You want a door you can be on both sides of at once. You want to be on both sides of here and there, now and then, together and alone. What did we call the life we would wish back? The old life? The before? But any space may be a threshold, an arch of entering and leaving, crossing a field, wading through nothing but timothy grass. Imagine yourself passing from and into, passing through doorway after doorway after doorway. I will now light our chalice. There we go. We kindle this flame, honoring the doorways in our souls, the windows through which we gaze at one another, the balconies where we catch glimpses of sky, the thresholds we stand on this morning, wondering, hoping, fearing, and dreaming.
Good morning, friends. Let's grab our small packet dated 4/18 or April 18th now. What did you find inside? I found this marble. You'll notice it is swirled blue and green, just like our planet, Earth. Until astronauts went into space, no one had a photo of what our planet looked like. Now there are marbles, beach balls, globes, Google Maps, and photos. We've even got a photo from 6.4 billion miles away that shows us the pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan called it. I want to share this short video with you today of Carl Sagan, an astronomer, planetary scientist, cosmologist, astrophysicist, astrobiologist, author, and science communicator who lived right here in Ithaca for almost 30 years.
There are now 4 spacecraft which are beyond the orbit of Neptune and Pluto, Pioneers 10 and 11, Voyagers 1 and 2, 4 vehicles of our species plummeting into the interstellar dark. Now, of all those worlds, we have no indication of life. For me, that underscores the rarity and preciousness of the Earth and the life upon it. And you can see it looks like more than a dot, but it is in fact less than a pixel. You can see that it is slightly blue, and this is where we live, on a blue dot. On that blue dot, that's where everyone you know and everyone you ever heard of and every human being who ever lived out their lives. It's a very small stage in a great cosmic arena. Just speaking for myself, I think this perspective underscores our responsibility to preserve and cherish that blue dot, the only home we have.
It is a spiritual moment to see our planet in space and realize we all live on this planet home. It has changed people's lives. What would our life be like if more people stopped fighting each other and became people of the Earth, caring for our planet and each other? Our theme this month is becoming. And on this day, our thoughts turn towards Earth Day, April 22nd. Our 7th UU principle inspires us towards respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Our faith and many other faiths make taking care of the earth and the natural world a part of being a religious person. Each Earth Day, we work to become even more aware of what is happening around us on our planet, in order to work toward helping our planet and ourselves. So one of the ways our faith guides us into being a people of becoming is by saying, become people of the earth. I want to tell you a story now by Janine Grossmeyer. It's called Clearwater. In the month of July in 1969, a gigantic rocket was launched into space. It sailed through the darkness away from the Earth, and it carried 3 people to the moon, 250,000 miles away. 2 people got out of the spaceship and walked on the moon. It was amazing. Through the ages, people have looked up at the moon and wondered what it would be like to go there. And finally, we had. People had walked on the moon. It wasn't easy. We had to come up with new ideas, figure out new ways of doing, invent new techniques, and build new machines. Thousands of people had to work together to make the trip to the moon happen. And we did. We made it happen. There was another group of people working together to build a ship. And that was another amazing thing that happened in the month of July in 1969. It wasn't as famous, so perhaps you haven't heard of it. After all, this wasn't a spaceship full of new inventions. It was a sailing ship, built like the sailing ships of old, the kind called a sloop. It had wooden beams, strong ropes, and a towering mast more than 100 feet high. It didn't go to the moon. It sailed the Hudson River, here in New York State. It didn't have thundering rockets or powerful thrusters. It had great white sails, like the wings of a gull, that caught the breeze and carried it forward on a whisper of the wind. The name of this ship was Clearwater, and she still sails the Hudson River today. Thousands of people worked together to help build the Clearwater, but she started from the idea of just one man. His name was Pete, and he and his family had lived next to the Hudson River for years and years. When they first moved there after World War II, trees grew all along the banks. Otters slid down the muddy slopes into the water. Fish swam in the river. Birds nested in those trees. The Hudson was a living river. But as the years went by, people cut down some of the trees and put up oil tanks. They dumped old cars and made a junk heap right across the river from Pete's house. People built factories and dumped chemicals into the river. People built homes near the river and dumped their dirty water and their garbage in it. Every year, people kept cutting down more trees and dumping in more filth. After a while, the water got so dirty that the fish couldn't live there anymore. With the fish gone, the otters didn't have anything to eat. With the trees gone, the birds didn't have any place to nest. The Hudson River wasn't a living place anymore. It was barely even alive. Pete knew this was wrong. He knew the fish and the otters and the birds needed a place to live. He knew the trees shouldn't all be cut down. He knew the river should live. He knew the water should run clear again. So he decided to make that happen. He decided to build a ship, like the great sailing ships that had traveled the river 100 years ago, back when it was clean and clear. The ship would show people what had been and what could be again. That ship would be the Clearwater. Pete knew he couldn't build a ship all by himself. He would need help. He knew he couldn't clean up the river all by himself either. The Hudson is a long river. A lot of people live near it. All of them would have to help. So Pete went to get help. He asked people. He wrote letters to people. He talked to people. But mostly what Pete did was sing to people. You see, his full name was Pete Seeger, and he'd been a singer and a songwriter all his life. He sang at concerts, campouts, meetings, at temples and chapels and churches, including at least one Unitarian Universalist one. His mother had been a Unitarian, and Pete joined a UU congregation in New York City and sang there. He sang in many places, and his songs were for everyone. Maybe you even know some of them. Pete knew that music could bring people together, so he wrote songs about the river, about the water and the trees, and about what we would have to do to make the water clear again. He traveled all over singing these songs. In his music, people saw a better world, so they gave money to help build the ship Clearwater, and thousands of people sent money for the Hudson River Sloop Restoration Group. In July of 1969, 4 years after Pete got the idea and the same month that people walked on the moon, the ship Clearwater was launched into the Hudson River. Less than a year later, in April of 1970, the Clearwater sailed down the Hudson River and out into the Atlantic Ocean, all the way to the capital of the United States, Washington, D.C. Clearwater went to Washington for the very first Earth Day, 40 years ago, to help teach people about how to keep our land clean and our water clear. Because Clearwater is more than a special ship. She's a special school. More than 10,000 people go on board every year, all kinds of people, and they learn about fish and crabs and water and bubbles and grass and all the things a living river needs. And they often sing songs, just like sailors do, just like Pete Seeger. People are still singing his songs, and the Clearwater is still sailing up and down the Hudson River. She's done a good job. People have done a good job. The Hudson River's cleaner now than it was all those years ago when Pete first got the idea to build the Clearwater. The sky is cleaner, and the land is cleaner too. Other rivers are cleaner too, but they're not as clean as they used to be hundreds of years ago. They're not as clean as they could be. They're not as clean as they ought to be. That's our job, to make that happen. To make the land clean and the air fresh and the water clear. It may not be easy. We'll have to come up with new ideas, figure out new ways of doing things, invent new techniques, and build new machines. And we'll probably write some new songs. Millions of people will have to work together to make it happen. And we can do it. After all, we've worked together before to make things happen. We went to the moon, and that was an amazing thing, no doubt about it. But you know, no one stayed on the moon. They all came home. No one lives on the moon. It has only dry dust and dead rocks. The moon has no air. The moon has no water. The moon has no earth. We need earth. We need that pale blue dot that Carl Sagan showed us. We need earth to be a living place, our living place, with clean land and fresh air and clear water. Because fish and otters and birds aren't the only ones who live here. We do, too.
Our meditation reading is In Between by Kate Walker. In between, liminal, that space where we wait. Between moments, events, results, action, no action. To stand on the threshold, waiting for something to end. And something new to arrive. A pause in the rumble of time. Awareness claims us, alert, a shadow of something different. In between invitation and acceptance, in between symptom and diagnosis, in between send and receipt of inquiry and question, in between love given and love received. Liminality, a letting go, entering into confusion, ambiguity, disorientation, a ritual begun. Pause, look back on what once was, look forward into what becomes. In between, liminal, that space where we wait. Look, listen, feel, breathe.
May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be whole. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole.
Each week we take an offering to sustain the important ministries and programs of this congregation and its presence in Ithaca. The giving information will appear on your screen in a moment during the offertory music. Giving to the plate is important. It's a symbol of our gratitude for this service and our ongoing commitment to support the work of this church. It is a form of love that takes the shape of generosity. The first time you give with the text linked, it is a longer process, but after the initial information is entered, the following donations are quick and easy. So please take a moment and give through either the text option or the giving button on the home page of the website. May these gifts bring about connection, inspiration, and engagement within these walls and beyond.
Our reading today is an excerpt from a recent interview in Elle magazine entitled Plants Were My Beacon of Hope During the Pandemic by Veranda Montgomery. Dr. Montgomery is a professor at Michigan State University working on plant adaptation to the environment. She also devotes significant time and energy to mentorship of Black scientists. These are her words. I planted tulip bulbs in November of 2019. I distinctly remember the process and timing of their planting. My father had died the month before, and I cried while I placed the bulbs in the ground. Even though I was suffering from debilitating grief, There was only a brief window of time in which I could plant them. They needed to be planted after the temperature had dropped to allow the bulbs to root but not to grow. Yet I also knew I had to get them in the ground before deep frost set in, when the ground would freeze, making planting and rooting impossible. In early 2020, I was still struggling with intermittent days of intense grief. But I had started to do what my father would want me to, re-embark on frequent travel to give talks on science, leadership, and cultivating equity across the US and abroad. Just when I was truly getting back in the groove of work and travel, I was grounded in mid-March as travel abruptly stopped due to the global spread of COVID-19. My usually busy life became restricted to the walls of my home. Daily, I moved between screens with endless Zoom meetings in my office, to my writing space, to the after-work space of the family room, and hastily constructed home gym at the end of a workday. While entering and leaving home, one day I noticed the green leaves of the bulbs I'd planted after my father's death were peeking through the mulch, a stark reminder that spring had snuck up on me. As the loss of life in the US and abroad continued to soar, I was fighting deep uncertainty, oftentimes veering into fear and even hopelessness. In the face of these challenging emotions and forced isolation, I continued to take in the emergence of new leaves of the tulips, followed by the flower buds. I was drawn to them because of their association with my father, but their undeterred maturation also reminded me that spring, indeed life itself, was moving on. As these plants grew vigorously, I began to draw hope from their seemingly undeterred commitment to pursue their purpose. As I drew strength from this annual pursuit, I began to see additional evidence of plants serving as hope and inspiration for others. Neighbors and friends whom I'd never known to nurture houseplants or gardens were planting and growing plants of all kinds. They germinated plants from seed, grew plants such as green onions and lettuce from kitchen scraps, and shared their joy and intrigue with cultivating these beings. Personal friends, social media connections, and sometimes strangers sent me pictures of thriving houseplants and vegetable gardens. They knew I'd be their biggest cheerleader when things went well. I also received pictures of yellowing plants and plants in other clear challenges with a plea for help. It seemed to me that plants, in homes and gardens alike, were nurturing much needed human connection and often leading to a collective source of hope. Now, spring 2021 has officially arrived. Just as in spring seasons past, plants are emerging anew, birds returning in song, the scent of spring flowers imbues the air, and so much more. I'm just now starting to see the hopeful emergence of leaves from my tulip and lilac bulbs this spring and this year, and it completely parallels my hope that we are emerging from the pandemic. My greatest hope in this moment is that we take the lessons we have learned and move forward into a renewed and hope-filled future. As we emerge from this winter of pandemic life, may we be like plants, carrying on with fierce determination and purpose. We are in a season of transition. Renewal and resurrection symbolized by Easter, throwing off our chains in whatever form they take, as symbolized by Passover. Opening our doors to the warm air as spring arrives, and gradual emergence from physical isolation as more and more of us are vaccinated against COVID-19. While these are all very welcome, I'm actually not so good with the transition part. It reminds me a little bit of spring in northern Wisconsin, wishing I could have the flowers without the weeks of mud that precede them. But whether literal or metaphorical, most transitions are a combination of mud and flowers, be it spring's arrival or our emergence from COVID isolation. We step out slowly, excited, unsure, a little disoriented, hopeful, maybe releasing pent-up grief or anxiety, wondering what has become of us. A few weeks into the pandemic, there was so much energy around returning to normal that in a short time we'd put all this behind us. Or on that imagined day when we got vaccinated, it would be like flipping a switch back to pre-pandemic life. But a year is a long time, and the peculiar impact of isolation and stress has changed us. Like the poet asks in the opening words, what do we even call the life we wish back? In the last few weeks, there's been a surge of news pieces about navigating the psychological challenges as we prepare for life after COVID. A humor column in the New Yorker suggested conversation starters. Tell me about your new podcast. Did you cut your own hair? Extroverts worry they'll talk too much. Introverts are busy trying to restore their public face. And even while we may have longed for that wonderful energy of in-person conversation and shared space, many of us will need time and practice to feel at ease. As a kid, I fantasized about living in a monastery where I could read and draw in peace without the social challenges of school. So, even as I crave seeing people, a small part of me has secretly relished the enforced isolation. But above all, this has been a year of marshaling unprecedented levels of energy to keep work, home, and family held together in the face of prolonged stress and anxiety. And I say that who's someone who has personally been extremely fortunate. It's been more than a year of holding our breath, shoulder at the wheel. And now, with the end coming into view, many of us feel like we're hitting a wall, realizing how much energy this year has consumed. Making our way to a new normal will take time and likely involve a complicated mix of feelings. Part of this transition is figuring out what's happened to us. What have we become during this time? What parts of that new self are we going to take with us as we move into a post-COVID world? For many, our experience in the past year is inseparable from political and cultural events in this country, and we are likely carrying our recognition of structural racism and renewed political engagement into the post-COVID world. Many of us also carry the weight of loss of family and friends to COVID, losses that we didn't have the opportunity to mourn, loss of precious time with new babies and elderly relatives, rites of passage that we've missed. Some of us have also discovered new ways of doing things and being in the world. I asked some of you in this UU community about changes that you hope to continue as we emerge from isolation. Many of you referred to new ways of being mindful, enjoying a slower pace, and new small rituals. One of you said, "A year of slow life made me discover a lot of interesting things I had missed in the faster lifestyle I had before." One friend mentioned dinners with her husband, where after running out of things to talk about, they started a more intentional practice of sharing art and poetry. Another mentioned nightly family walks before bed. Other people I contacted talked about new connections, regular family Zoom calls, coming together with high school classmates to fundraise for their school, One of my unexpected joys has been renewed connections with far-flung cousins, where we share memories on Facebook about bits of family memorabilia we each have. My college classmates have been sharing pictures taken on walks to encourage one another to exercise. I know from all the photos of hikes and outings that many of you have renewed appreciation for the natural world. I have never been so grateful to live in a place with abundant natural beauty and public space for walking and biking, or even just looking out the window. From where I'm sitting right now, I have watched the morning sun turn snow-covered tree branches into a sparkling fairyland, a pileated woodpecker descend on the bird feeder like a pterodactyl, and the box elder putting forth flowers like little chandeliers. After a beautiful sunset or fresh snowfall, I love seeing the wave of photos posted on social media from all over Ithaca, as if we'd never seen a sunset this beautiful before. There was a long article in the New York Times a couple weeks ago, composed of reflections from readers about their changed priorities. Some of these might resonate. The pandemic has forced me into the present. It's the meditation I never wanted, but have come to appreciate. I know I am becoming someone different. It forced me to let go of any notion that I could hold myself together and get on with the show. I finally started looking at myself. I made a vow not to miss another Christmas or Japanese New Year with my parents. I don't know how many I'll have left with them. I am not going to try to be polite anymore. I am going to hopefully become less behaved, ballsier, more outspoken, and a more dangerous woman. All these rules I had followed, those rules will not save me. Thinking back to the first couple weeks of the pandemic, I remember being seized by the urge to make things. I was going to sew hats, learn to make pop-up books, keep a COVID journal filled with profound reflections. Well, I ended up making masks instead of hats, and I think my COVID journal lasted for about 7 entries. As many of you know, I enjoy sewing, typically small wall quilts designed with very specific vision. But this past winter, lacking energy and focus to plan anything specific, I tried something new and started picking up the scraps left from other projects, many scattered around the floor, and just started sewing them together with no particular guiding vision. If I got stuck, I let things sit for a while, sometimes cutting them back up and sewing them back together to improve the balance of color or shape. Pleased with the outcome, I got super ambitious and started pulling out scraps I'd saved from quilts made 10 and 20 years ago. I can sew everything back together. But then realized, nah, some of this fabric doesn't spark joy anymore. I can leave it behind. I think with kids, this kind of activity is called undirected play. And it has turned out to be one of the most rewarding and restoring activities I've done this year. These have been some of the few moments when I could really let go of the hypervigilance that has characterized this year. I'm going to now share my screen to show you some of these. There we go. So these are 4 of the quilts that I've made. 2 are relatively finished, 2 are not. But I look at all these fabric scraps, each with their own history and associations. And I think, maybe this is what our transition out of COVID could be like. Repairing connections, reveling in the colors and forms, even if they look different than they once did. This will take time. There will be trial and error and rearrangement. Slowly releasing the state of anxious vigilance and reacquainting ourselves with the spirit of play. And I hope this is something we can do together as we move through this period of transition. Restoring our connections and opening doors to one another in this season of mud and flowers.
We celebrate the web of life, its magnitude we sing. For we can see divinity in every living thing. A fragment of the perfect whole in cactus and in quail, as much in tiny barnacle as in the great blue whale. Of ancient dreams we are the sum, our bones link stone to star, and bind our future worlds to come with worlds that were and are. Respect the water, land, and air which gave all creatures birth. Protect the lives of all that share the glory of the earth.
Open up the doors. Push on looming wooden arches embroidered with ironwork. Brace shoulders against the weight of history unmoved. Slough off the musty smell of unused joy and stored up sorrow. Knock rust off the hinges if you have to, and let your breath precede you inside. Open the doors more. Make room for a shaft of sunlight to cross the threshold. Give the dust motes something to dance about. Peek through a single slice of possibility and name even the half-hidden truths you see. Open the doors wider still. Pour yourself through the gap. Strut or sneak or sidle as suits you best. Cleanse whatever scrapes catch your skin and bind up the wounds that keep you from entering whole. Open the doors as far as they will go. Draw on the strength of the stones beneath you. Ground yourself in a firm sense of who you are. Stand as a beacon, welcoming the next seeker, and shine far beyond the lintel and sill. Open all that you are. Heighten and deepen your connections to the world around you. Broaden your definition of neighbor. Grow into the largest target for grace that you can muster, and pray to become a gateway for even greater love and compassion. Open up the doors, my friends. Our service has now ended. Go in peace.